When I was maybe 17 or so, I remember getting a summer job at a carnival that rolled into our town. I did it as a way to hang out with my friends and talk to girls, the usual reason any kid would want a summer gig. I saw online that a local food truck needed part-time helpers, and that was perfect for me. Flexible hours, moderate pay, and there would be other people my age to work alongside. When I pulled up to the carnival on my first night, I noticed the barns and gravel walkways filled with people and booths for vendors. I checked out the truck where I would be preparing lemon shake-ups and corn dogs. The owners were a nice older couple who knew their employees would be high schoolers, so they didn't expect top-notch performances, just that we worked the few hours we were scheduled to and didn't hand out free food. There was this girl I was working with that was absolutely gorgeous. I had seen her around school and could hardly stay on my feet when I was told we shared shifts. She was laughing and chatting with her friends when I stepped up into the truck to begin food prep. She turned and looked at me with a smile, her dark eyes and chocolate hair blue, seeming to wave at me, courtesy of the desk fan taped to the truck's wall. "You must be Mark, right?" she asked me. I nodded my head, scared of what would happen if I spoke. "I'm Haley," she said in response to my gesture. I finally managed to squeak a "nice to meet you" before I buried my nose in the prep counter. I didn't have much experience in food service, but all I had to do was dip a hot dog on a stick into butter and batter, and then set it on the fryer for a few minutes. Haley would work the cash register and just tell me what to make. It was simple work, and after a while, I was able to strike up some pretty good conversations with Haley. Apparently, she had a pretty sad past with an abusive father, and her mother remarried rich. That would explain her tricked-out car she drove to school. Being someone who was always labeled as an uppity girl in school, she actually was pretty down-to-earth and kind. It wasn't until after my second hour that I noticed something odd. Across from our truck, there was a man grilling chicken for a fundraiser for the local fire department. But what was strange is there was a brightly dressed clown wandering circles around his area, seemingly stalking him. He stepped away from his grill and moved to take a plate of meat into the tent where it would be served. But as he went out of sight, the clown moved in and made his way towards the grill. I saw him begin to unscrew something on the fuel tank beneath the grill and start slipping things inside of it. I don't know if this was a routine or a joke, but it seemed too real, and nobody was watching him. I told Haley I would be right back and went to confront the clown. As I closed in and swiftly went towards him, he looked up, and that's when I saw it. The clown had an odd face. His chin was too low, his eyes were slightly too far apart, and were an odd milky white color with no pupils. That wasn't cheap clown makeup. This was his real face. There were dark sockets surrounding his eyes, as if he was supposed to have something bigger in its place. The clown gave a childish look of surprise when I approached him and asked him what he was doing. He handed me a rusty hammer from his bag that was thrown over his shoulder and bolted quickly away and around the corner within seconds. I chased after him, but as soon as I turned the very same corner, he was gone. It was a straightaway with no entrances. The clown had to have been there. There was nowhere else to go. My thoughts were interrupted as a man grabbed my arm and spun me around. It was the man from the grill I had seen. "Do you want to explain what I'm seeing?" the man told me in an angered tone. "What are you talking about?" I replied. The man pointed to his sabotaged grill that had its fuel tank smashed and pouring fuel everywhere. "If I would have turned that fuel tank on, people would have died, kid," he screamed at me. People all around looked at us with a disgusting look. "It wasn't me. There was some guy dressed as a clown that ran off. The one standing by you for like the past 10 minutes. I shot back at him. He looked at me confused and then told me that there was no clown standing by him and that he was all alone. I stood there shocked, but also creeped out. What did he mean by there wasn't a clown? After a round of apologies for something I didn't do, the firefighters left me off the hook relatively easily, all things considered. I returned to the truck, and Haley was inside furious at me. "Thanks for the help," she said sarcastically. I apologized and lied, saying that I got caught on an important phone call. She just rolled her eyes and went back to the register. Maybe 5 minutes in, I saw one again. It was a clown, similar to the one before, but slightly different. This one had orange hair and a bowler hat, but the face seemed vastly similar to the one from the grill. It was pushing a young boy in a wheelchair, with seemingly nobody else around. Was this one really just a helper trying to be nice, or was it actually just as sinister as the other? With a young child on the line, I wasn't taking any chances, so I followed it. At that time, I'm glad I did. Luckily, the truck was on brake, and we could go where we wanted to without abandoning the truck. I followed the clown and the boy into what looked like a fun house. I started getting concerned about the clown's intentions as we got to the second floor. That's where I saw it. The boy was blindfolded and laughing, likely thinking he was just having fun, but the clown was dangling him over the ledge of a maintenance doorway that dropped 30 feet onto the hard ground. The clown slowly turned his face to meet my gaze with a twisted smile and a sinister cackle. He started to let go of the wheelchair as I bolted over to him and tried and grabbed the chair before it was too late. I body-checked the clown out of the way and grabbed the handle just before the boy rolled off. The clown made an odd noise and jumped away dramatically into the darkness of the funhouse. I was relieved to see the boy still sitting there blindfolded and laughing, still unaware of his situation. Once again, my thoughts were interrupted by a curdling scream. It was a woman standing below and staring right at us. Her screams brought a crowd before I could even comprehend what was unfolding, but that's when it hit me. I was being framed again. The next few hours went by like a flash. First, I was handcuffed and brought to a security station for questioning. Then I was walked right in front of my boss and Haley, where they were told what I had done, or rather what I had been accused of. To no surprise, I was fired on the spot, but what hurt more was seeing Haley's look of disgust as I walked away. The police told me I was banned from the carnival event, and if I returned, I would be trespassing. I held my head down in disbelief at what just happened. Nobody believed me of what I saw, and nobody else seemed to have witnessed the clowns but me. If I was lucky, I'd be able to return to school this fall and not have this follow behind me. On my way out, I passed a magic show and decided to blend into the crowd to at least get some enjoyment out of tonight. The magician called on his lovely assistant to help with his next trick. The assistant that walked out, though, was a fumpy being in baggy flashy clothes that wore a crumbly wig and skirt. It was another clown. I watched the clown closely as I recognized its gaze locked directly into my own. It smiled another sinister smile, and it walked swaying its hips dramatically. The magician pulled out a large crate and asked for a volunteer to step into the box as the clown held the door open. He picked a young woman from the crowd, and I recognized her immediately. It was Haley. She grabbed the magician's hand and stepped up onto the stage. The clown held the door open, motioning her to step inside, but as he did it, he turned again to look directly at me. At first, I panicked, but then I came to my senses. Everything I had tried to stop tonight only ended up with me in trouble, so I decided to call the clown's bluff. I just smiled at him and waved, provoking him to actually do something or admit defeat. I felt a wave of satisfaction run over me as the clown frowned and scowled at me for not getting involved. But that emotion started to waver as his twisted expression turned into one of evil and sick joy. He shut the door with Haley inside and then made a swift exit out the back of the stage. The magician said his magic words and swung the door open. Some people puked, others screamed, while some thought it was still part of the show. But what was inside the box was something that burned into my brain that I can still see to this day. It was the mangled and torn apart corpse of Haley. I stared in terror as the box leaked with blood, and the magician stood startled on the stage, wondering what had happened. As first responders arrived, I knew I needed to make my exit or risk for being seen by the police. I ran home and shut myself in my room. Does this mean I really was saving people's lives tonight? Would that grill really have exploded? Would that boy really have fallen to his death? I asked myself what these clowns were up to and what they had against me, but my only conclusion was no conclusion at all. To this day, I've never seen those clowns again, but I know what I will face if they ever do return. Do I take the blame for their actions, or do I let them carry out their torment on someone else? It started with an accident, a tiny one, my heel striking the curb at just the wrong angle, twisting the bones till they popped. The doctors wrote it off as a minor strain, sent me home with a pat on the back and a script for painkillers. It was my brother, a math major, who pointed out the coincidence. So it happened at the intersection of 1st and 28th Street on the 128th day of the year. Freaky. He waggled his eyebrows at me. What time did it happen? I'd taken a late lunch, worked a bit in the cafe before heading back to the office, gotten back shortly before 1:30 p.m. His eyebrows flattened. Seriously? Weird. I didn't think it was weird. I would have forgotten about the incident completely if it hadn't been for what happened 2 months later. I'd only lost my focus for a second, normally not an issue, unless you're behind the wheel on the interstate with a four-wheeler pummeling in your direction. I'd wrenched the wheel, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision. I veered over to the shoulder and waited for the smell of burnt rubber to leave my nostrils. When I chanced to look at the dashboard clock, it read 1:28 p.m. I twisted around just in time to see the four-wheeler disappearing around a bend in the highway. Its license plate, FYU 128. That night I made a list. Accidents, mistakes, plain bad luck. The time I subluxed my patella on the soccer field in 3rd grade, or got trapped on a roller coaster for 6 hours following a park-wide power outage. The time I learned I qualified for a full-ride university scholarship the day after the paperwork was due. The little things, misplaced valuables, cracked iPhones, unpleasant surprises on tax day, didn't need much. They might have happened on 128 or in the 128th house on the street. The only college class I had to retake held its final exam in classroom 128, which might explain how I failed the test I'd spent 6 weeks studying for. The bigger ones, bad breakups, terminal medical diagnosis, deaths in the family, seemed to need a confluence of symmetries, dates aligned with times or addresses or coordinates. The greater the confluence, the worse the outcome seemed to be. My friends always joked that I was unlucky, a lightning rod for misfortune, but it wasn't that at all. I was being targeted. I rang up my brother. He might as well been sitting across from me for how clearly I could read his expression of concern. Targeted? By who? Do you remember the day Dad died? It took him a second to process the emotional whiplash. Yeah? But what? It was January 28th. I called the hospital. Guess what room number he was in? Aaron. I surged on, determined to get my story out before he had me committed. I'm just saying, you hear some numbers are more common in the universe than others. Some weird quirk of nature that nobody really understands. Or people see the same numbers over and over and claim it has some spiritual significance, like angel numbers or the Fibonacci sequence, or Benford's Law, or schizophrenia, he suggests. Shut up! Here's my theory. There are entities, intelligences, or whatever you want to call them, that express their will under certain conditions. In my case, the appearance of a specific sequence of numbers. Just pretend, for a second, that it's possible. What would you do? I'd roll over and wait to die. Sarcastically speaking, there's no way to avoid a number. Numbers are the blueprint for everything you see. They are the language of nature. They are... He stopped himself, realizing too late that he allowed himself to get swept up in the intellectual exercise. He cleared his throat. But this isn't about reality. This is about your perception of it. What do you mean? Well, let's take the accident. Do you remember how fast you were driving? I don't know. 80? Do you know how many kilometers per hour that is? I felt a chill walk slowly down my spine. Exactly. And if you wanted to take it further, how many times do you see a 128-degree angle? Or read the 128th page in a book? The point is, you're not aware of these instances, so you don't experience any bad luck in anything that is affected by your perception. Not the undeniable fact of reality has to originate inside your head. Or, I suggested, you just made it easier for it to find me. As I stared at my phone, a pop-up alerted me that the 49ers had won by a landslide, score of 1-28. My weather app notified me that it was raining again, coming up on 1.28 inches of rain. I had missed a robocall, 128-553647. I was still staring at the screen when lightning split the sky in two. A freak accident, that's what the news outlet called it. Vox did an article about it. You might still be able to find it floating around the internet somewhere. They called me the girl who lived through lightning, but that's not really true. The lightning didn't hit me, it hit the roof, cracking the house open like an egg and spilling singed shingles all over the front lawn. I knew I couldn't stop coincidences. I couldn't avoid the manifestation of this thing, this entity, any more than I could stop the march of time. But I could try. My brother was right. If I didn't know when the door was open, it couldn't come in to greet me. I destroyed all the clocks in the house, defaced too many books to count, and burnt the offending pages. Then I booked a last-minute flight to somewhere I was unlikely to find a clock or license plate. There are precious few of those places left. I should probably explain why I'm writing this. At this moment, I'm sitting on a plane as it descends through dense black clouds. Thank God for in-flight Wi-Fi, or what could very well be my last words would be lost. I'm scared. I feel the vice enclosing me, an incredible pressure building. We are finally breaking our holding pattern, while it circled in the sky, waiting for the storm to clear. A flight that was supposed to touch down well before midnight on January 27th altered its arrival date to January 28th. We are approaching 12,800 feet, and I can't stop staring at the little screen in front of me, announcing the latest updates to our flight details. Our estimated landing time is 1:28. Wish me luck, please. I'd never been someone you would imagine as the picture of physical health. Throughout my career working as an actuary, I spent most of my week sitting on a chair, poring over an endless stream of spreadsheets and sipping on coffee with an unholy amount of cream. On the weekends, I would binge whatever new hit shows were released on the plethora of streaming platforms I begrudgingly subscribed to. All in all, I never considered what effect my largely sedentary lifestyle would have on my health. That all changed last winter. I was helping my mother move furniture for a garage sale when I felt an intense pain in my chest. I didn't think much of it at first, but the pain worsened, and I realized that the unimaginable was happening. After a short ambulance ride and a long hospital stay, I was given the good news. I was a very lucky man. I had survived a heart attack, but considering I had a BMI of 41 by my 42nd birthday, I knew I had to make a change. Ever since that horrible day, I've been focused on health, almost to a flaw. A diet, go to the gym every other day, and even use a standing desk at my office. I've honestly never felt so confident, especially now that I've lost 50 pounds since last year. As a part of this change, I've made a ritual of going for a 2-mile run every Friday night to help clear my mind after work. Just running through the park near my urban apartment always gives me a sense of clarity, a perspective that helps me center myself. This Friday started like any other. I grabbed my running shoes and earbuds and set my smartwatch to time my run before jogging out the door. Usually, I listen to ambient music and soft instrumentals to contribute to the meditative nature of the run. But as I started down my route, silence greeted me. Not willing to stop my exercise to see what the issue was, I popped out my earbuds, deciding the silence of the night would be an acceptable alternative. It was a clear, beautiful night, the moon peeking shyly through a layer of dark clouds, providing a pale glow to accompany the harsh light provided by the electrical lamps lining the running path. It was only 8 p.m. when I started the run, but the stars had already begun to twinkle overhead, barely visible with the ambient glow of the city underneath. The repetitive crunch of my shoes on the concrete began to lull me into a trance as I ran at a comfortable pace down the aisle of bare, deciduous trees. With a sudden awareness, I realized that my path was blocked by a form of a man. He was tall, taller than me by at least a foot, and seemed to be wearing some sort of dark trench coat or cloak that obscured his body. I slowed to a walk as I drew near, the moon reflecting dully off his black matted hair. He stared at me with pupils so wide, it was as if his eyes were chips of obsidian buried in his skull. By this point, there was 5 feet between us. The man stared at me, turning his head from one side to the other. I could feel my pulse quickening, but not because of the cardio workout, but rather from a sudden fear that gripped me. I didn't know what to say, so I lamely called out, "Hey there!" The man didn't respond, but began to shake his head vigorously, convulsing rapidly. As I stood there, completely unsure of what to do, and frozen by a sudden fear, I noticed some odd features of this stranger blocking my way. His hands moved almost non-stop, passing back and forth under the blanket he wore like a cape, scratching frantically at his legs. He was muttering under his breath, something I could not understand despite straining to hear. I realized this man was likely having a mental health crisis, or maybe suffering from some sort of drug overdose. Despite that, I couldn't help but feel terrified by the stiff, unnatural way he moved, as if he was being twisted and contorted by an invisible puppeteer. I reached into my pocket and retrieved my cell phone, trying to dial 911 to hopefully get an ambulance here. But the moment I took my eyes off the stranger, I heard an immense shuffle of movement, and when I looked up, the man was simply gone without a trace. I shuddered, suddenly aware of how impenetrable the darkness off to the sides of the trail was. I decided to cut my run short, turning around to run back the way I had come along the park trail. As I ran, I strained to listen for any sounds that would indicate I was being followed, but was greeted only by dull thuds of my own feet on the pavement. With my head on a swivel, I worked my way back to my apartment building, punching the code into the gate at the stairwell before heading up to my floor. After getting inside, I allowed myself time to process my experience, silently thanking whoever was watching out for me. Just when I thought the nightmare was over, I saw my doorknob begin to jiggle from the corner of my eye. Fortunately, the deadbolt stopped the would-be intruder, but as my veins filled with ice, I ran to look through the peephole. What greeted me was a pitch-black void, as though the world outside had been drained of all light. I thought that someone had covered the tiny window when, with a sudden motion, the darkness I gazed into blinked. I realized then, with a shock of fear, that I was looking into the eye of the man I'd seen in the park. The wide, dilated pupils taking the entirety of my door's minuscule peephole. I found myself transfixed as I gazed with horror into the eye. With a sharp motion, the man pulled away from the door, and I could see him standing there on the welcome mat, his hands roving across his face as he frantically scratched and pulled on his skin. I could see blood beginning to drip down his nose and cheeks as he began to tear at his pale flesh. He didn't seem to feel any pain, just staring straight ahead as his fingernails cut deeply into his forehead. I fumbled for my phone, trying desperately to call for help. With a thunderclap, I jumped back from the door when I felt a sudden weight slam against it. I gave up trying to watch him through the hole and just sat there on the phone with the dispatcher, wedging myself against the door. Help was on the way, but I wondered if he would be able to kick in the door before they got here. After a few minutes of silence passed, I slowly stood and cautiously looked through the peephole again, holding my breath. Once again, I was greeted with darkness, so I quickly ducked back down. I told the 911 operator that the man was still at my door, and she reassured me that the police were almost there. I sat, barely daring to breathe, as I listened to the officers arrive. When I heard them at my door, I shakily stood and threw the door open in a rush. The rest of the night was spent answering the cops' questions and filling out a witness statement, as they assured me they would investigate it thoroughly. After all, the sergeant chuckled. "We have plenty of DNA evidence." "What do you mean?" I whispered, bile rising in my throat as I began to imagine what lay in the hallway beyond my door. With a knowing look to his partner, the officer stood and gestured for me to step out into the landing in front of my apartment. When I did, he slowly shut the door to show me the outward-facing side of it. When I saw the state of the whitewashed wood door, I gasped in abject horror. The last time I had looked out the peephole and saw only blackness wasn't because the man was looking in it at all. Rather, it was because of the blood, skin, and dark black hair that was messily smeared over the entirety of my front door. I got a doll for my birthday. She looked just like me. Same brown hair, same blue dress I wore. Mommy said she found her at an old shop and knew I'd love her. I named her Lily. Lily was fun at first. We had tea parties and I told her secrets. But then, weird things started to happen. I'd leave Lily on the chair, but find her on my bed later. Maybe you forgot you moved her, Mommy said, but I knew I didn't. One night, I heard a noise like tiny feet walking. I peeked from under my covers and saw Lily sitting on my desk, but her eyes were looking at me. It made my heart beat really fast. Next day, I put Lily in the closet. I didn't want to play with her anymore. She made me feel strange, but when I came back from school, she was sitting on my bed again. Her smile looked different, bigger. I told Mommy, but she just laughed. "Lily's just a doll," she said. Then the scariest thing happened. It was night, and the moon was bright. I woke up feeling cold. I looked around and I wasn't in my bed. I was on the shelf where I kept my toys, and in my bed, where I should have been, was Lily. She was under my blanket, her eyes closed like she was sleeping. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I couldn't move. My arms and legs were stiff as wood. I looked down at my hands. They weren't my hands. They were doll hands. I don't know how long I stayed there. The moon moved across the sky, and the room got darker. Then, light peeked in the morning. When Mommy came to wake me, she didn't see me on the shelf. She went to the bed. "Time to get up, Amy," she said to Lily. Lily moved. She stretched and yawned like she was really me. I wanted to cry, to tell Mommy it was me on the shelf, but I couldn't. I was just a doll. Mommy left the room and Lily got dressed in my clothes. She looked into the mirror and smiled, but her eyes were scary, not like mine. I sat on the shelf every day watching Lily. She played with my toys, ate my food, and hugged my mommy. Nobody knew I was here on the shelf. Years went by, so many years, sitting on the shelf in my room. But it wasn't my room anymore. It was Lily's room now. She grew taller and older, but I stayed the same, a small porcelain doll with a silent voice. I watched Lily become a teenager, then a grown-up. She stopped playing with dolls, stopped noticing me on the shelf. I was just a forgotten toy in a room filled with memories. Then one sunny day, Mommy decided to have a garage sale. She gathered old things that weren't needed anymore, and that included me. I was placed on a table with other old toys, my dress faded and my hair a bit tangled. People came and went, looking at all the stuff. Then she came, a little girl with bright eyes and a smile that reminded me of me a long time ago. Her name was Emma. Emma saw me and her face lit up. "Can I have this doll, Mommy?" she asked, holding me gently. Her mom nodded, and that's how I left my old home, tucked under Emma's arm, going to a new place. Emma's room was full of colors and laughter. She played with me every day, telling me stories and secrets, just like I used to do with Lily. She named me Rosie, and I loved that name. It felt new and happy. Then something strange happened. One morning, I felt a tingle in my fingers. It scared me, but it also made me hopeful. Each day I felt more and more. My arms, my legs, they started to feel real again. One night under the moonlight streaming through Emma's window, I felt it. I could move, just a little, but it was movement. My heart, if I still had one, was beating so fast. I closed my eyes, wishing, hoping. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning, but everything was different. I was in Emma's bed, covered in her blanket. I sat up, looking at my hands. They were real hands again. I jumped out of bed and ran to the mirror, but the reflection staring back wasn't mine. It was Emma's face. I touched my face, feeling real skin instead of porcelain. It was like magic, but also scary. I turned around and saw the shelf where I used to sit. There in my old spot was a doll. It looked just like Emma, with her cute dress and shiny hair. But it wasn't Emma. It was just a doll, still and silent. My heart felt heavy. I understood then. The same thing that had happened to me and Lily had happened to Emma. I was free from being a doll, but Emma She was trapped, just like I had been. I remembered Lily and realized she must have been a real girl too, turned into a doll. The only way to break the doll's curse was for another little girl to take my place. It made me feel sad and guilty. I didn't want Emma to be stuck like I was, but what could I do? I was in Emma's body now. Now I go to her school, play with her friends, and live her life. But every night, I look at the Emma doll on the shelf and whisper, "I'm sorry. I wish I could change it, make it all go back to normal, but I don't know how. Amy."